What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast. Today we are going deep on injuries, rehabilitation, and all things load management. This is a super important discussion for anybody who's experiencing pain symptoms right now. Strap yourself in. We're going to take a deep dive. Good morning, peeps. This is the first time I have been on the podcast for a while, and it's the first time I've been on the podcast alone for a long time. Of course I'm not alone. I've got the voice of God, Richie, behind the mic. Say hi, Richie.
Hey, guys.
So today we're going to make up 3 shows worth of content from our content strategy here in one podcast. And the reason we're doing that is because we've all been on vacation lately, except for Richard. Richard's been doing double shifts at the gym and making up for everyone's slack asses. But I've been away and I've only just come back. We didn't do a podcast yesterday, but we've decided to kick things off with a big one today. So we're going to cover 3 separate topics. Why understanding pain science is so important for recovery and progress. This is a discussion that we usually have our resident physio, Phil White, on the show for. He's very passionate about the pain science concepts. We're also going to cover why most injuries are caused by poor load management, not movements themselves. Movements don't hurt people. It's piss poor load management that injures people. And finally, we're going to cover the difference between macro and micro loading and why technique matters most. These are 3 very important topics. I do apologize. I'm going to talk fast because I do want to get through them, and we're going to share some stories, Richard and myself, about how we have mismanaged load and how learning about load management through our interactions with some of the best physios in the country have really helped our physical training. So first things first, to kick things off, there's a notion that we experience pain in the area of pain as though there are pain receptors. Who's heard of the term pain receptors? You've got your pain receptors somewhere in the limbs, under the skin, in the muscles, in the tissues, and it's those pain receptors that send the pain signal to your brain, and then your brain perceives the pain signal. That's not actually the case, and the way we interpret pain is actually all through the brain. And the good thing about this is that as we learn more and more about pain science and we start to understand how the brain works, we can actually learn to dial down the experience of pain symptoms. Now, I know this sounds quite far-fetched, but trust me, it's true, it's the case. And this is something that I've been putting into practice a lot since I started to read the work of Norman Doidge. He wrote a number of great books. The 2 that were the most profound for me were The Brain's Way of Healing and The Brain That Changes Itself, which was the first book that I read. And in The Brain's Way of Healing, he goes deep into his experiences visiting research centers and universities in the US where they're doing a lot of pain science research. And the reason why they're doing this and why it's so important is because people that sustain quite serious injuries, a great example or a common example is ex-military soldiers who have potentially lost a limb or suffered a really serious injury. They often experience phantom pain in the limb that's no longer there, and it's very difficult to overcome. They've had the injured area of the body amputated, or they've lost it, and they still experience pain. And let's say they have an amputated leg just below the hip. Often they'll still experience pain in the knee and the foot and areas of that limb that are no longer there. And the only way, no medication can treat it, the only way that they're finding success in treating it is to learn and understand pain science and learn and understand how to dial it down. And this is something that I was oblivious to until I met Phil, our resident physio, and we started to talk about this, and it made a lot of sense to me because it's something that I've worked through on a personal level myself. I had I've had a number of big injuries, nothing as bad as having a limb amputated, but I did have a horse riding accident when I was a young child, falling from a horse that fractured a few areas of my spine and caused a lot of damage and caused a lot of long-term pain. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older and I started to dive deeper into this stuff that I learned that a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing needed to be addressed on a psychological and an emotional level, not just on a physical level. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, tomorrow actually, the concept of injury identity. But the first thing we need to understand is that pain, although we experience it in the area that we hurt, it might be the fingertips, it might be the hand, it might be the wrist, the elbow, wherever you have hurt yourself, you roll an ankle. There are no pain receptors there. There are sensors, of course. There are nerves, and the nerves are sending signals to and from the brain, and the brain then determines whether that is a problem for the body, and if it's a problem for the body, then it will cause you to experience a pain symptom, a pain experience. And those pain experiences all come through an area of the spinal cord that can and be addressed. And Phil sort of described this to me as almost like the volume switch on a stereo. You know, when we first hurt ourselves, the volume cranks right up and we experience that pain quite seriously, and it can be quite traumatic. And then over time, as our body becomes used to it and we start to go through the healing processes, the brain starts to turn that volume down. And what they're finding in the research is that you can actually do that yourself. You can learn to turn the pain down and turn that volume down, which is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, that's the first thing that we usually like to talk about when we do this series on rehabilitation and load management. And it's hard for a lot of people to grasp. I get that, you know, someone here sitting here telling you, if you're in acute pain and someone's telling you that you can just turn it down with your brain, you might find that quite frustrating. I certainly would have back in the day when I was experiencing severe back pain. And of course, like anything, it takes a lot of work. And it takes, I guess, a lot. You know, you need help. You need someone to guide you through that process, and that's what they do in these research centres and in these special hospitals. They help to teach you how to overcome your pain symptoms. It's not something that you can just go and do. I've certainly experimented with it myself, and I've had both positive and negative responses. If the pain is like absolutely severe, it's very hard to dial down, but you can certainly do it. The next thing I want to talk about is why injuries are caused by poor load management, and this is one of the big key lessons that we teach our tribe here at Unity Gym and on the UMS online coaching, the concept of load management. It aligns very much with progressive overload, and you know, I'll give you an example. At the moment in the gym, we're doing a wave loading method. It's a strength overload technique. It's very, very common, and it's quite an advanced overload technique. And Richie, you can chime in here and tell me, because you're teaching all of the classes right now in Rad's absence. Do the beginners do the wave loading? And if they do they are they allowed to go to maximal load?
No, we're not getting beginners to do wave loading. It's a more progressed, advanced weightlifting protocol.
Yep.
Most of the people that are coming in have a little bit of training experience, but they're not at that level yet. So we put them through a more basic conditioning phase first to get them used to all the movements before we even really test max strength. I think that's really important for all new people to train, that they don't test max strength until the movement is perfected and they have quite a good understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of load management. Richard is managing the load of the beginner, the newbies to the UMS and Unity Gym, and that's very, very important, because during that period, and we're going to go into this in a moment with the difference between macro and micro loading, during that period, these people are adapting to the exposure to exercise, the stimulus on a daily basis. That's the first thing. Our program is unique in and of itself by the fact that we encourage people to train every day, 5 or 6 days a week. We don't do lifting on Sunday usually, unless you're on a different sort of program split. But it's a lot more. It's a radical intervention, exercise intervention, and most people aren't used to that. And so that in and of itself is the first load that needs to be managed. That is very, very important, just by coming and turning up to Unity Gym, not even by maxing out your weights, not by trying to get all of the volume in every workout that the senior guys might do. Just by turning up every day is the first load that needs to be managed. And these different, I guess, modules of stimulus have to be layered, and that's how we manage load. So what Richard's saying there in the fact that the new guys don't do the overload technique, that's an example of managing load. If you came in and started a gym and you'd been training 3 days a week and you've now jumped to doing 5 or 6 training sessions a week, strength, flexibility and fitness, and then you also threw on top of that a really advanced overload technique like a wave loading cycle, that would be poor load management. And when we manage load, that's when we injure ourselves. And this is the most important thing for people to understand. Progressive overload is key to, as it sounds, progress in your training, but also to avoid injuries, because injuries generally only come when we're exposed to something that our body is just simply not capable of handling. And you know, a great analogy that Phil sort of talks about with load is that, you know, if you imagine that your body is like a cup, and when we expose it to stimulus, it's like filling that cup with water. The more experienced you are, the bigger your cup and the more you can handle. The more of a beginner you are, the smaller your cup and the quicker it overflows. And when it overflows, we hurt ourselves. And I think that's a really great analogy, because it's really clear to understand. As you are in your first or second year of training in a really like proper environment where there's proper program periodization, there's all these things are considered, you are considered a beginner. You're an untrained individual. You may have done marathon running or a little bit of gym training in the past, but if it's been sporadic and not under proper conditions, then you have to take all that into consideration. You've got a small cup, and as Richard said just before, you know, you're experiencing people come into the gym who are experienced in regard to the fact that they've done gym training before.
Yeah.
But when they start UMS, it's very challenging, right?
Yeah. You got to start people at the right capacity.
Yeah.
The right cup.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
If you give them the wrong cup, then yeah.
Well, we know what happens. We become injured, and that's what why it's a topic of discussion on our communication strategy, because it's just so important to understand. So the next thing we want to talk about, we understand that pain is something that all pain, and I know this is hard to grasp for some people, but all pain is perceived in the brain. Of course, you can overload or cause a trauma to an area of the body that becomes injured, and the brain is going to make you experience pain in that area. But the pain is still it's still manufactured in the brain by the brain to sort of protect us from continually hurting ourselves or hurting ourselves even more. And with conditioning, with practice, with help, with the right training and awareness, we can affect the pain symptom. We can actually alter the outcome of the pain symptom, but it does require, first of all, awareness, and that's all we want to achieve today. Second is why the need for load management. Very, very important. We need to manage our load, which usually in its most basic form is to really understand and deploy progressive overload in your training, whether it be for flexibility training, whether it be for strength training, or whether it be for cardiovascular training. If you start something new, irrespective of whether you're a trained individual and you've done some form of exercise before, always approach it as though you have a small cup and you're just, working at the capacity that you've got right now available to you. Don't overflow your cup. Don't injure your body. The last thing we want to talk about today is the difference between macro and micro loading. And this is really, really important because a lot of people don't really quite understand this, and it's very interesting to watch Phil and Nilesh and the guys who work more with professional athletes as physiotherapists work with their clients or patients, because most of the stuff that they do after they do an initial assessment and get a bit of history around what's occurring in the body, they work very much out on the gym floor, especially Phil. And what he works on is really dialing in people's form and technique in movements. And this is super, super important because when we don't use correct technique, or our technique is not quite there yet, we expose the body to more and more load, and the loading variable becomes very hard to manage. It's sort of an uncontrolled environment. We want the gym in most cases to be a controlled environment. Very different. Remember, we talk about, and I digress a little bit here, we talk about the difference between training and competition. When you're in competition, it's an uncontrolled environment. Almost anything can happen. But when you train, you want it to be a controlled environment, because we train every day, and you just cannot sustain a healthy body if you're out of control every single day. That's why we can't compete on a daily basis, and that's where certain exercise philosophies sort of fell over a little bit initially, like CrossFit, where people were encouraged to do WODs, really intense, randomized training every single day. It just overloaded people's bodies, and most people hurt themselves. Training is a controlled environment, and one of the most controlled principles in training is your form and technique when you're doing movements. And 9 times out of 10, when Phil has a really big breakthrough with a client, I watch it on the gym floor, it's just correcting or perfecting technique. And this is something that Richard and Rad are doing extremely well out on the gym floor. We've systemized our entire workout so that the warm-ups and the cardio circuit or conditioning circuit at the end, there's actually monitors there that demonstrate the movement so people can stay on track, so that their focus remains primarily on the workout zone where people are doing their strength and flexibility training, the more advanced lifts, so that they can really dial in the cueing and the coaching and the technique mastery in those movements. And that's one of the more important parts and unique parts of our training, our training system. And the reason that's important is because we are exposed to 2 different types of load in our lives. Micro loading is how we how we exercise in the gym, the technique that we demonstrate, dialing in your squat technique, dialing in your deadlift technique, dialing in your bench press technique, and those things usually have huge breakthroughs in people's strength and ability. The macro loading, which often people don't take into consideration, is what we're doing outside of our workouts. And this is another way that people really poorly manage load. So to give you an example, a lot of people get really, really sore, problematic lower backs from sitting in chairs all day. And the reason that happens is because sitting in a chair is a macro load to the lower back and to systems in the body, postural systems. If I was to sit crooked like this all day long, I'd end up with quite a sore lower back, probably a sore neck, because I'm asking my body to sit and endure long periods of time in an awkward position. That's what we consider a macro loading variable. Another macro loading variable would be if you have to move house. This is a really common classic example, and we've all moved house many times. I know Richard moved just recently, as did I, at the start of the year, I think, or maybe it was last year. Time flies. You spend the entire weekend lifting heavy stuff, but moving boxes, moving furniture, and then you get to Monday and you want to hit the gym as hard as you would usually do on any other day. But you don't really take into consideration that for the 2 days that you would usually be either resting, recovering, or doing lighter workouts, you've just lifted all day long, sometimes more than you would usually lift in a workout. And so you're carrying that fatigue from the macro loading of moving your house, moving your furniture, moving your belongings into your workout. And that's another really great example of the second point, really bad load management. You are going to expose your body during that workout to excessive load. Your cup is already full from the weekend. And now you go to the workout and overflow the cup, Yeah.
Well, what's probably more common, people do sports outside of the gym as well. So
great
rock
example.
climbers.
Yep. Rock climbing is a classic
When
one.
you're doing a lot of gym work where your upper body is frequently used, your grip strength is frequently used.
Yep.
And then you go outside and you're doing all these sports as well. You're just, again, that capacity, the cup is getting filled up over the edge.
A good example, why don't you share, you trained Tom, who's a rugby player, during lunch times here.
Yeah.
And you guys have had to change the workout split so that it doesn't overload him for his training and game day, right? Why don't you explain what you've done there?
Oh, it's pretty simple. Like, we just basically, we don't follow the program template exactly to the day. We just program his leg days on other days that doesn't affect his game days and his training days.
His training, yep.
So he gets enough recovery and he feels good for it.
Yep. So the example there, to expand on that is, our client here at Unity Gym, Tom, is a rugby player, and if he was to do a heavy leg day because he trains at lunchtime before he goes to training in the evening for rugby. If he was to do, and I actually went through this myself many years ago when I played soccer, I used to, for a short period of time, I tried to do leg days on training day, and I got to training and I could hardly move, and very, very quickly I started to strain muscles and tear muscles, because once a muscle starts to become overly fatigued, the elasticity principles and its ability to contract and extend start to diminish, and you expose yourself to tearing and micro tears and also major tears in the body, which result in acute injury. And so that's just another good example of how we help our clients here manage load by changing. Although we have a set program split that everyone follows, Monday through Friday, and the advanced guys, the senior guys, come in on Saturday. If we've got an athlete training, we have to change that split, because we've got to factor in that we can't tell them to stop competing and we can't tell them to stop training. Our training at Unity Gym is to provide a foundation for athletic performance, strength, flexibility, and fitness. And we encourage people to deploy that to some degree in either a sport or a hobby or something that they're passionate about. It might be CrossFit, it might be rugby, it might be yoga, it might be rock climbing. All we do is provide the foundation for all of that. If you don't have a sport, we introduce calisthenics, and calisthenics becomes your way of demonstrating your strength, flexibility, and it's a great way. There's some cool stuff you can do. You show off. It's to some degree it's competition. It might be you versus you, but not necessarily, because you see someone else do a move and then you want to try and do that move and you want to unlock it. So it is certainly a means of demonstrating and competing. But a lot of our members actually, a lot of our tribe actually do participate in sport. They have a sport that they demonstrate their their strength, flexibility, and fitness, which is fantastic. But often, depending on the level that they're competing at, we have to alter the program to suit, and that's how we manage load. That's how we manage macro loading and micro loading. So what we want to wrap up on is to make sure that you guys understand that, exercises themselves don't injure people. Poor load management injures people, and load management can come in different ways. It can be through range of motion, pushing your body into a range that you're not stable or strong in, or flexible enough for. Flexibility comes from the body becoming stable and strong in that range. And it may come from just sheer overload. You may actually just lift a weight that is far beyond your ability on that day, or in general, due to macro loading, or just due to a lack of strength, and that causes instability and problems in the body. These different ways of mismanaging load can come in a variety of different scenarios. But what's most important is to understand that that's what causes injury. It's not a squat. You might have hurt yourself doing a squat because you didn't manage load properly. You pushed yourself too deep and into a range that you weren't ready for, or you lifted a weight you weren't ready for. For some people, load load can be mismanaged just by moving in a way that they're unconditioned for. An example might be picking up a suitcase off a turnstile when you're traveling that weighs 20 kilos. I've heard of people twisting and bending over to pick up something very light and throwing causing a spasm in their back, a muscle spasm, because their body goes, holy crap, I don't feel safe in that movement, therefore I need to inhibit it. Don't do it again. I'm going to cause a really painful spasm in your lower back now to make sure that you don't try that again, And so, load management for that person is don't do that movement at all. You're not conditioned to do it. You need to strengthen your core and your back and build some confidence in your body so it doesn't cause those back spasms or muscle spasms, And then on top of all of that, you need to understand that if you have caused an issue, a spasm, a tear, you're experiencing pain, that pain is something that's being generated in your brain. All pain is generated in the brain to protect you from harm, or to let you know that you've done something that the body did not like. It might be obvious and you might be bleeding out everywhere because you've opened yourself up, but if it's less obvious and it's a deeper issue that you can't see, then your body's going to tell you that it's hurting, and you need to sort that out and either let it heal, or if it's been a long time since the injury and the injury has already healed but you're still experiencing issues, then you need to start learning how to dial that pain volume down so that you can get back on with your life. And a good physiotherapist will help you through that process. Get in touch with us and we'll align you with Phil or Nilesh, the guys that work here. We're going to talk about what happens tomorrow on tomorrow's podcast. We're going to talk about what happens when you fail to tone that volume, that pain volume down, and you start to form an injury identity, something that sticks with you for a very long time. It's something that I've certainly dealt with. And I'm going to share with you the story of how I broke my back and what that did to me through my adolescence, teenage life, and how that inhibited my ability to perform at the highest level. All that and more coming up on tomorrow's show. Thank you for joining us today, Tribe. Thank you, Richard, for sharing some of your insight in training the Tribe here at Unity Gym. We'll see you all tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that far.
It's the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.